So welcome. I'm really glad to have you all. I'm Casey Droege, and I run Small Mall, which is part of my business, Casey Droege Cultural Productions. We are a business that's focused on growing the arts economy in the Pittsburgh region. And tonight I'm here with David William, who is co-curating this show with me. Say hi, David. Good job, everybody. So David and I are putting together this show of Alex and Nicole, and I'm gonna let him talk a little bit about the show, which again will be TBD. It'll be at our project space, which is in Wilkinsburg. And hopefully we'll do an in-person talk at some point as well too. And then we're gonna let Alex and Nicole talk tonight. So they'll both do a presentation, they'll both have a discussion, and then we'll open it up for questions. And like I mentioned earlier, if you have a question during their talk, throw it into the chat, or later on you can unmute yourself and you can ask it out loud. If at any point you're loving stuff, give us a wave, show us your hands. You can also use little reactions at the bottom of your screen. You can give us a thumbs up, you can give us a clap. It's always appreciated. So I'm gonna hand it over to David. Let me unmute you. Hi, David. How are you?
Hello, everyone. I'm doing well. Hi, everyone. My name is David William. I'm recently celebrated my 1-year anniversary of living in Pittsburgh, having moved here from New York. And prior to that, I was in DC and Baltimore, where I met a bunch of fantastic artists, one of whom is Alex Ebstein, who is here with us today. And this exhibition is the first of what I hope will be several opportunities to connect Pittsburgh artists with artists from other regions in the US and possibly wider. And it's been fantastic so far working with Casey and Alex and Nicole to bring this about. As Casey mentioned, we were meant to have an exhibition, which should already be open. In fact, it was meant to open on April 4th in the CDCP project space in Wilkinsburg, but some things have happened, you may have noticed. And so we're pushing that off until the fall or the winter. And we'll let you all know when that's happening. The show is called Extra Fiber, and it is funded in part by the Opportunity Fund. And the grant that we went out for to create this mini series of exhibitions is for art that has some relationship to craft. And we started looking around and landed on Nicole and Alex as a pairing for our first show, because in part their work is just great. It looks really cool. I really want to touch it. It's very tactile, and it just looks really, really nice together. But also they're playing with materials in what we thought was a really interesting way, where, as you'll see, Alex's work has this relationship to painting, but the method of construction is kind of similar to patchwork quilting in a way. And Nicole is kind of drawing in 3D space, but doing so in a way that has a relationship to embroidery. And so those are just a couple of kind of little conceptual hooks for this. More than anything else, I think the stuff just looks great together, and I hope they'll let me touch some of it. Alex is, as I mentioned, one of the artists that I met in my time in DC and Baltimore. Alex makes tactile abstractions using ready-made and non-traditional materials, most notably cut yoga mats. Alex's work borrows materials used in gym equipment, yoga and dance studios, and construction projects to examine tropes of self-help, boutique fitness, and the white cube space. Alex's surfaces contribute a sense of familiarity, utility, and even commodity, while occupying the transportative territory of painting. Alex received an MFA from Towson University in 2015, and previously a BA in studio art from Goucher College in 2007. And in addition to Alex's studio practice, she's the founder and director of 3 galleries in Baltimore since 2009, Nudishank, Phoebe, and currently Resort Space. And Alex is also the director of exhibitions and the curator at Goucher College. And Alex's exhibition roommate, Nicole Czapinski, Pittsburgh, investigates illusions within perception and the complexities of consciousness, transforming something that first reads as a flat surface into something with volume and depth, which I can attest, I don't know if any of you saw her work at the Westmoreland Museum. If you get like right up on it and off to the side, you just see all kinds of new stuff at different angles with Nicole's work, which is really fantastic. And I'm looking forward to y'all being able to see that at the project space. Nicole's from Pittsburgh, received a BA from Bennington College in 2006. Nicole's had solo exhibitions in Pennsylvania at the Pittsburgh Center for the Arts, Penn State, the Westmoreland Museum of American Art, and 707 Gallery, and solo shows in Vermont at the Vermont Studio Center, Bennington College, and Burlington City Arts. Nicole's work has been featured in numerous group exhibitions, including the Pittsburgh Biennial, at Trestle Gallery in New York, and at Southern Exposure in California. We're very, very excited to have Alex and Nicole here. They're each going to show you a little bit about their work individually, and then we're gonna turn them loose to sort of have a conversation with one another before we then turn it over to all of you to get your questions asked. And I believe we are going to start with Alex.
Okay. Let me just share my screen. One sec. All right. So this is me. For anyone who's familiar with my work, you probably know me best for working with yoga mats. That seems to be the thing that that stuck, and it's the thing that I've been working with the most in my recent work. But it really came out of a tactile abstraction and sort of material exploration that was more broad and a little bit it was, you know, I still worked in series, but it had a different sense of exploration and sort of variation, and you know, sort of a mix between found materials and free materials and things that I sort of sourced from living in artist live work warehouses and sharing studio spaces with other artists, and things that sort of just came my way. This is some of my earlier work. I was making some geometric abstractions with sort of soft, humble materials like craft yarn and sort of craft spray paint, like almost like the silly string spray paint, and fake leather. Yeah, and some potting soil and all different kinds of things. And I was really hands-on in like building these surfaces and constructing a lot of these objects, and sort of came to yoga mats out of a necessity, necessity-born invention. I started making these white yoga mats that were sort of performance artifacts after I had a couple of eye surgeries and had to stop working with tools for a little bit in order to heal from them. And so, yeah, I mean, my sort of changing perception was really leading me towards a tactile sense of working anyway. And so it sort of seemed natural that this sort of rubbery, spongy material that was like really satisfying to grip and cut and stretch and work with, you know, came into the practice. So I was making a lot of these. I think I had an entire room at some point of 20 of them before I was able to build again and sort of bring them back into that previous language that I was using. So this is sort of one of my first pieces where I was kind of combining all those different methods of working, sort of thinking of it as like a big collage or a quilt that I could frame and put in back into the language of painting. These are some more recent pieces from a series that I was working on that were sort of, you know, not necessarily influenced directly by the body, but they sort of had this body as like an inspiration for some of the abstraction, as something that I was thinking about in the back of my mind. They all sort of have like a droop or a lean or a slouch, or like a physical shadow. And eventually, because I was using yoga mats and I really wanted to let that material dictate some of the concept in the work, I became really interested in it and satisfied by it, and sort of creating variation within that limitation of using yoga mats. I created a series that I was really excited about in my second solo show in New York. This is at a gallery called Victory and Mo, and the show is called Fad Bodies. And I made a series of, so these larger images over here, of pieces that were based on the way the internet was sort of perceiving me as someone who was ordering yoga mats in bulk. I was being sort of ad targeted, all these boutique fitness ads and sort of like strange fitness equipment. Then they were sort of clogging all of my social media or all of my banners when I was looking at the internet, and sort of gathering those and finding a way to make that body as a form to be perfected and a form to be sculpted or worked with as a series of posters that, they were sort of about the way that like health and fitness are marketed as a luxury good. So these are 3 of those pieces from Fad Bodies that were in another show, actually also at Trestle Gallery. And then this was my most recent sort of series of work. I was interested in what that looks like as something that was sort of taken into the mode of product. If I pushed that sort of variation on a theme into like an even more narrow and direct relationship to the body or yoga, like what does that end up looking like? And I was interested in doing that with the context of the show, which was an exhibition that I had with Esther Ruiz, who really makes a lot of repetitive forms in her work, and sort of spending 6 months planning the show with her and sort of taking cues from each other and some of the things we were thinking about, which were ways in which the phone becomes the space for art to live, and then the way in which we see each other in our process. And so that was, my most recent series. I think that's my last image. So I'm going to stop sharing. Cool.
Nicole, you should be unmuted now.
Great. Hello. Thank you for everyone being here. I know there are so many virtual events happening, so thank you for choosing ours. So I'm gonna screen share a presentation. Let's see. Okay. So my main body of work consists of these 3-dimensional thread drawings that I developed. I've been developing since undergrad in 2005. And so I create these wooden frames, I paint them white, I stretch them with a sheer fabric on the front and the back. And then with a long needle and thread, I sew in between the panels. And it's a very intuitive process as each line of thread kind of develops and a shape emerges out of the space. And in general, within my work, I'm interested in visualizing the invisible, which really boils down to every single moment outside of this very second, as life is abstracted and reconstructed in our minds as the past and the potential future. It's fascinating to think about opening up a brain and slicing into it to find nothing of the lived experience. I mean, I understand there are electrical currents and synapses and billions of connections kind of firing away to construct the reality that I see, but really, where does it all exist? And so I make work out of utter confusion and awe as to why we are here and what it might mean. And as you can imagine, within this pursuit, there are always so many more questions than answers. So what does a thought look like? Does it have an edge? What does it mean that the universe is expanding? I can imagine the idea of infinity, but I don't understand it. Where did yesterday go? Like, I have no idea. Where did it go? Just gone. So within these questions, it kind of became apparent that an expanding mind is within itself an expanding universe. And so I'm inspired by science, and in particular neurology and space exploration. And I love this constant questioning and search for truth within the sciences, which to me translates to play and exploration in my studio. And so this next body of work that I'm going to show are these gridded plastic canvas sheets that I've framed, and then I use these pipe cleaners to kind of create these gestural marks. And it really kind of became a project that came out of really working intricately with thread and wanting to work with a material that was much more forgiving and that could be super quick and just kind of like more playful. And I'm inspired by the alchemy of these super simple materials to try to communicate gigantic ideas. And so recently, and bear with me because I'm still trying to articulate what this new idea, I've started viewing both the threaded drawings that I showed in the beginning and these newer pipe cleaner drawings as a way to visualize the concept of a multiverse or a parallel universe. So within the gridded framework of the plastic canvas and stretched fabric, there are thousands of holes, which present thousands of options. And so these structures create a network of holes from which X number of decisions can be made. I choose a place to start. A line enters through the enclosed space. It loops back around and exits or hovers. So all outcomes are present. And through intuition, I choose a path until a shape or the drawing kind of emerges. The empty space or empty holes offer a view into a set of hypothetical possible universes, including the chosen path of the drawing seen within the frame. So present within the negative space are all of the unseen paths, as each piece represents just one iteration on a possible infinite scale. And so with the pipe cleaners and with the thread, nothing is fixed. They're kind of just held in place by the very structure of the plastic canvas or of the stretched fabric. And I like to think about time and choices and how seconds kind of play out each day to alter our realities. What is the ripple effect of so many beings living and coexisting at the same time? And how does that affect our individual lives?
Cool. Thanks, Nicole. So I'm going to hand it off to you and Alex to start off your discussion. And then everyone, again, if you want to jump into the chat with questions or comments, feel free. Or we'll wait till the end of their discussion and we'll open it up for questioning then.
Nicole, you were saying that science is sort of your main interest and one of your inspirations for your work, but you speak about it so poetically. I was wondering if specific literature or poetry comes into your research as well.
I mean, not off the top of my head. I feel like I've just recently kind of started reading more poetry. I don't know if you're familiar with Ross Gay. He has this like lovely book of poems about everyday beautiful moments. He was a visiting writer at the Vermont Studio Center when I was there. And yeah, his poems are just beautiful. And they describe like super simple like interactions that he has with everyday people. I think it's like Unabashed Joy or something about joy. I forget the title of it, but Ross Gay is his name. You can look that up. But in terms of science literature, I'm really interested in things that are easily digestible. So Oliver Sacks and Neil deGrasse Tyson, to those two kind of come to mind.
Yeah. I like to dabble in the like faux science or sort of sci-fi area, like the Italo Calvino and sort of these like, where does gravity change and how does an object or a sense of bodies interacting like get affected in a composition by your imagined sense of gravity or space. And I found those to be really influential for a while, some of his short stories.
Cool.
Cosmic comics.
Yeah. Do you, I was wondering about your work, like there seems to be so much movement in terms of the body, of like unexpected twists and turns. And I was wondering if you could just talk a little bit about your process of like, you know, when you start a piece, like, can you identify like what kind of kicks it off? Is there a drawing? Is there like just a moment or?
Yeah, that I draw a lot. I probably draw, 20 or 30 little thumbnails for every. Oh yeah, this is like a lot of. This is like some zoom. But there's,
Oh, cool.
but there's like little. Yeah, I draw a lot of like really crude thumbnails for each sketch.
Oh, that's cool. So you draw like the outline and then you like the thumbnail is like drawn.
The thumbnail's drawn, yeah, and then I sort of fill in with color and a sense of like space and gravity. I sort of change around as I cut the shapes, and sort of decide where the horizon ends up almost last, based on a sense of how things feel like they're floating or falling or resting. But yeah, it's a lot of drawing and it's a lot of I layer things and I can, like you would, I think weirdly enough, like working with something soft and flexible came out of thinking about the way you would cut like linoleum tile or wood to inlay, and how you'd sort of cut through two layers at the same time with like a Dremel or something. And so using just like an Olfa knife, and I use a lot of sand weights. I like fill some jugs with sand weights to get everything to lay flat, because everything's mostly on one plane. I'm gonna like do this a little bit so that you can see. It's like this. Some of this stuff. This is wood and cord. So this is on top, but for the most part, everything is like inlaid into the same surface.
Oh, cool.
And so there's also variations in some of like the widths. So they'll get like, this is a little step. But for the most part, it's they're like, they sort of act like paintings, and I think of them as collages while I make them until they sort of are contained by the rectangle. And
oh, cool.
Yeah, and then they sort of become painting.
I was kind of thinking that too, because whenever I sew or like any material I'm using, like the color of the material becomes the object that I'm making. That doesn't make sense, but like I don't ever alter the original color of the object that I'm using to create. So I was wondering about you, do you ever paint or do you always just source your colors from the material that you're using?
I mostly source the colors from the materials that I'm using, and then I have like a couple of extra things that let's see, like that one behind me, this guy. So like sometimes I'll like paint on the yoga mats, or use scraps as painting palettes for works on paper, and then end up saving the space where I was mixing paint because I liked the way it looked. So yes, there's added color, but often it's from another project, because I seriously have like so many of them around. That's a messy corner. But yeah, so they're like a good, and I have like boxes and boxes of the scraps, which sometimes I use to like, I'll like paint those and do contact prints with those, or sort of flesh out the composition of a painting, like use them for underpainting and some surface texture before starting a painting, which is interesting because I also don't show people a lot of my painted work. I'm like still finding a place for that with with so much expectation put on this body of work. I don't always get to show everything, and I sort of have to find the right way to bring the other work that I make into that same space.
Mm-hmm.
How about you? Do you feel like you relate your work more to drawing or to,
Yeah,
I mean, I know like sewing too, and embroidery definitely is part of it, but.
Everything just feels like a drawing always. Like no matter what I'm doing, it's like it exists in space and it just feels like this line, like everything is a line, everything is a drawing. But I feel like I use my phone a lot as like this kind of like sketchbook that I just take like tons of videos, like small little moments that are captured, and that becomes like a living, I can only describe it as a sketchbook that I kind of just collect and then potentially repurpose or just like contemplate and think about. So I just have a folder of like things that happen throughout the day, of like moments that, yeah, I mean, sometimes I haven't really I haven't like thought about how it kind of just like develops as I'm going. I haven't really thought about like how, I know that they're important. Like I know that these videos that I'm making are important, but they show up in ways that I document my work. Like in the videos that I was showing, like it's been really difficult to take pictures of work that kind of is engaging with something that's invisible. And like we live so much online, especially right now, that it's like I've had to kind of be creative on how I show the final piece or show like the work that's led up to the final piece. And so there are these like little moments of interactions, whether it's like my hand touching something or a way of the piece is moving on its own, that kind of contributes to the final creation of the piece. But I haven't really figured out how to, like, if it's a piece or if it's just like for me. Like I feel like I do so many things that like, you know, I don't show anyone, or just like I don't know, I don't have the kind of container for them to be just a video piece, you know. Like I recently, or I guess a few years ago, I created a sculpture that kind of housed a video piece, and that felt like so that felt like a good direction to like kind of, okay, this makes sense for the video to exist in an object, as opposed to just like screening something. So like using video as a material.
Right, because I mean, it's almost like part of your phone anyway. It's like captured in an object, and you sort of have it as a handheld video as you make it. So
Yes.
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah, I definitely source imagery as well. Like I was saying, I save like these screenshots of ads, or I'll take photo for color, like just the way colors are interacting next to each other. But yeah, less so for form. Sometimes like I did I got to do a residency in Kenya in 2018, and so walking along the beach was really nice because like your shadow changes over the course of the day, and sort of like using that elongation or like foreshortening and sort of ways in which like familiar forms change against like bumpy sand and the waves coming in and stuff was like really nice. It was on an island, so if you'd walk to town, you'd like walk through sand every day, and that was like helping to generate a series of monoprints that I made while I was there that were sort of based on phone images and thinking about collecting in that way.
That's cool. Yeah, I've this just reminds me, like I've been taking lots of walks as we're in isolation, and like the only thing I can do is like walk my dog. And I've noticed kind of like I've really noticed the shadow of like the leaves as they're growing. Like the sun kind of like the leaves are creating bigger shadows as they grow. And so it's like I kind of can see like the growth through shadow. Like on my walk, there's a particular tree in my alleyway that like I love walking under and kind of seeing it slowly kind of just, eventually it'll just be like a blob, right, that I'll walk under, but now it's like dappling sunlight.
Nice.
Yeah.
How did you start making art? Were you sort of in a more traditional medium, and find your way to sort of non-traditional materials or craft materials, or
so I guess like you know, growing up, it was something I always did, was I would draw. I remember doing these like super intricate drawings of like the remote control, or like my family entertainment center and just like trying to pick up on all the little like details. And I knew I went to a liberal arts school, and there it was kind of this, so Bennington College, I don't know if anyone's familiar with it, but they kind of have this open-ended framework to education where you don't have grades, you have written evaluations from your instructors, and you work with an advisor to build your own education. And so it kind of was like, it made so much sense to me because I was like interested in astronomy, like not that I was going to major in astronomy, but I could take astronomy classes and also like a sculptural class. And it was like I discovered this kind of way of working with thread and the stretched fabric in college, and it was acceptable to kind of bring in this piece that had no paint at all involved into a painting class. And it was like, I feel like I was just really encouraged to explore and kind of find what I was most interested in and kind of just take it and run with it. And so I think like that early education of just like, okay, find the thing that like kind of sparks that like, ooh, what is this feeling, has like propelled me since then. It's like, that's like as soon as I feel like this, you know, tingling sensation of like, oh, this is something I'm interested in exploring, it kind of goes back to that early college education.
Yeah. I also attended a liberal arts school where I now work.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, so I get to work with all of my former professors again, which is kind of amazing. But yeah, it was also sort of, you know, there's no concentration, and there was like sort of an encouragement to explore and to like bring other research from other areas into your practice, which was, yeah, definitely gave me much more of a sense of freedom than I think some of my peers like at Micah had, you know, that sense of at the same time. So
I'm going to pause you guys for a moment, if that's okay. And we're just going to start to bring in some of our questions. We're getting some great questions from the chat. So for everyone, I'm going to hand it over to David to start with the questions from the chat, and feel free to throw more in. But then after we get through some of those, we'll just start to open it up, and you'll be able to unmute yourselves now and jump in and ask a question or give a comment. So David, you want to?
Okay, so we've got a question from Ali Karsh for Nicole. Your color palette feels influenced by your material choice. Threads and pipe cleaners produced for arts and crafts are rainbow colored and kind of automatically playful. How do you feel about the way these colors influence your explorations?
Yeah, so one thing I kind of realized recently that I've been kind of struggling with the fact that my work is so playful. And like the reason why I struggle with it is because like I'm still like trying to figure it out, but I've noticed that I've been pushing up against it, and it's something that I want to like keep pushing to be like, no, like it's okay to be playful, it's okay to find joy, like it's okay to be happy even in like this like super dark moment that we're all experiencing. But I think it's just the way that society kind of continually tells us to like second guess ourselves, or to kind of not be happy, not lean into the joyful. And I think color is like a direct communicator of that, of those kind of experiences.
Yeah, I think that's so valid. I'm remembering a couple of professors in grad school had just diametrically opposed views on humor and art, and one of them just wouldn't consider art that involved humor. Like, you're not taking yourself seriously, et cetera, et cetera. And the other person was like, no, like humor is what gets people's guard down, so you can like inject serious subject matter like kind of in through the side door.
Totally.
Yeah, and like as we're seeing now in our present circumstances, it's so necessary. Like, some people, totally valid, are going out and like watching Outbreak and watching The Walking Dead and so forth, but other people are just rewatching 30 Rock like 5
me too.
And that's fine. So
I also think that it's gendered too, like as a woman that's making like colorful work, like like we're kind of used to taking certain ways of working that are formal, like more serious, that are most usually made by men. So I don't know if you think about that, Alex.
Yeah, absolutely. I had a lot of pushback in grad school. Actually, I had, like, oh, well, this is in the tradition of like women and quilting, or, or something that felt like it was being said by the male professor to minimize. And it was like, yeah, it is. And I'm proud of that. And I'm bringing that into like a language of abstraction and painting that, and, displaying that prominently, and playfulness and experimentation and non-traditional materials and accessible domestic materials are completely part of the art lexicon. Like, why not? And why try and narrow them, especially in an educational setting? That's so inappropriate.
And also, Professor Guy, quilting is pretty hard.
Totally.
Like, there's work. There's a lot to figure out.
Yeah.
All right, we've got another question from Jamie Ernest. Both of your work seems to be visually influenced by interplay of forms and design. And where would you say that type of aesthetic influence comes from for each of you?
Forms and design. Well, I mean, honestly, like, yeah, I was looking at a lot of Annie Albers and like thinking about softness against geometry, especially when I was in grad school, and thinking about the way geometry and pattern can be changed and free. I know I did this in our meeting and then I wrapped it back up. We were talking about like, this is an older piece of mine that's like in plastic, and I'm sorry, but it's all twine that's stretched over painted canvas and sort of only attached at the ends, so that it like breathes and moves, and every time it gets shown, it sort of changes, and like the variation in the pattern change. And I think it's about how pattern can be disrupted by experimentation or the accident, and things that sort of inject some spontaneity into a sense of pattern and regularity. And especially, I mean, I was in this really weird position where I went to grad school being excited to be over all these eye problems, and then had like an eye surgery in the middle of grad school. So I really started to think about like perception and the way I saw pattern and I saw repetition and things that were changing, and how like I had something wrong with me that no one else could see. And so pattern was sort of a way to think about it and to meditate on it for me.
Yeah, and speaking of that sort of changeability, I'm remembering, Nicole, I saw a piece of yours hanging up at the CDCP project space earlier this year, and it just happened that that piece was hung like in a consistent air current, and the whole time it was just kind of like gently wiggling a little bit. When you had spent all of this time very precisely establishing where the points of these lines begin and end, and what that line was going to do, it was just sort of defying that for the whole show, and I thought that was really great.
Yeah, so this was a piece that I don't have out, but it there's like this kind of structured line work, and then I just left like 2 long strings hanging down. This is just a work in progress here, but you can kind of see like the threaded pieces are just like hanging there loosely, which I haven't figured out how to really resolve, but I kind of like the I don't know, the contrast of just like willy-nilly like lines, just loose wiggly lines, and then also the structured like framework of these like shapes that are kind of like appearing.
The next couple of questions are about material experimentation. Nicole, can you talk about a piece with ice that you did from the Brewhouse show?
Yes. So I guess so I have this series. I can grab these watercolors. So I have this series of watercolors, And there are Sharpie markers, kind of create these blobby rocks. And then with diluted watercolor, I kind of encase them and then blot out the excess water. And this series was kind of the first iteration in 2-dimensional, and then I kind of wanted to see it in 3-dimensional. So I created these, I created like rocks. They're just rocks that are suspended in Jello. And then I was doing these video experiments with like touching the Jello and having it wiggle and having the rock be solid. And then that kind of translated into an ice sculpture that I created this kind of pedestal for. And so there's a rock suspended in ice that sits on top of a pedestal on top of a piece of wired mesh. And then each day in the exhibition, this piece of ice is set out and it drips back into the bucket of the shape that originally formed the piece of ice. And so it's kind of this hourglass, I think, of sorts of like a measurement of time. And ideally, the piece would be set out continuously and eventually just evaporate. And so like no new water would be added, and then just over the course of how many months of it being like reset out and frozen at night and refrozen and set back out until it just kind of disappears. So again, kind of playing with that invisible like a vape of something that would just evaporate the show. Yeah.
And kind of dovetailing that with another question from Allie, have you thought about projecting any videos of this time-based work onto the materials that you're using for the framework?
So wait, say that again?
Have you thought about projecting your videos onto the materials that you're using for the wall works?
I haven't done that. I had a really great opportunity to do this residency at the Glass Center, the Pittsburgh Glass Center. It's called Idea Furnace for Pittsburgh artists. You should look it up. It's an amazing opportunity to like have one-on-one, hands-on expertise, like build a new body of work for you, basically. Like you have a huge stipend to kind of go back and work with technicians. And so I created these kind of glass orbs, and I sandblasted the outside of them and then projected some of the video pieces that I was talking about earlier projected inside of the glass orb. And so it was like already the video is like already abstracted and then further abstracted into like this glass orb, and then also on a like concave, is that the right word? Where it's like on a curved surface. And so the video, like there's so many ways that it's abstracted. So you couldn't really tell what, and I think I had like a pretty, like not a very good quality projector. So if I could have like if I could get a better projector, I think you could get more details from the video piece, but yeah.
That's very cool. And Alex, could you talk a little bit about the role of time and chance and material experimentation in the way you approach your work?
Yeah, time and chance. I think for me, this work sort of all came out of that. There was a lot of like meditating on change and meditating on like the body as a source for abstraction with the white yoga mats, and sort of like finding a way to make something whole and predictable, sort of like more elegant and more interesting through like deteriorating it, and sort of making a synthetic inaction of change, of time and change on it. And so that was sort of like the beginning of creating my language of form. But I think time and chance really, like, they play the biggest role now in like the actual pieces. Like I plan a lot of my work out because some of the pieces I showed have like these metal pieces on top that like they're basically drawings that I then CNC cut and then get powder coated. And so I'm thinking about the forefront shape and almost working backwards, like digging into a composition from like a foreground to the background. like more so than I think I've ever drawn. You know, like normally you start with a rectangle and you draw from the back to the front. And, you know, I'm trying to more so generate these forms because those take the longest time. Like, you know, once I cut them, I have to outsource the powder coating. So, you know, in the time that it sometimes takes to get some of that work back, I'm like working on the background, and that's changing, and it's changing without the front form, like the foreground form in the studio with it. So that's some chance, and there's definitely like, you know, a little bit of mystery until the whole thing comes together.
In your initial thumbnailing, are you just trying to work kind of like fast and loose and gestural, or are you being very intentional?
I would say fast, loose, and gestural, and then as soon as I sort of find a form that I like, that sort of feels like it has like weight or solidity, that's, if it doesn't feel like it's the same language as can be achieved with the PVC, that's when I sort of make that into the drawing for the metal. And then I really focus on perfecting that shape, and then everything else sort of comes into focus around it after that's done.
That makes sense. Our last chat question is from Nathan Manuel. He says, the frame has such history. Yes, Nathan is here. From Nathan, the frame has such history. Both of you appear to use materials and aesthetics that could be off the grid. So what attracts you to that history and structure of the frame and the grid?
Well, for me, I'm using a material that sort of has it like has a grid in it, like the yoga mat sort of printed over something similar to almost like the pieces that you're putting the pipe cleaners through. Like it has sort of like a flexible plastic grid inside of it, and then it has PVC that gets sort of injected through it. I'm imagining, I don't work in a yoga mat factory, but that's what I think happens, because it's just the way it sort of like feels around that central structure. And I like the variation and sort of like wobbly change of the grid, and sort of how much more that comes across when you put a hard angle next to it. And when you when you draw that sharp line, you sort of see the organic variations within a material that we think of as really synthetic. And I like that sort of contrast for me.
Yeah, and I think I like playing with this like super structured idea of a grid and like softening it. Like I loved hearing you talk about your materials and kind of this soft humbleness to them. And I kind of, for me, like I need that container for whatever reason. Like I need a container to contain the idea. Like I love that with the threaded pieces, which I can show you here, it's like, it's a grid, right? But it's like, it's see-through, and it contains air. Like I've started conceptually adding air to the list of materials that I use for this series. And yeah, there's something about like softening the grid, like softening this idea of like structure, but it's like, it's necessary. Like I need the structure to create every piece that I've made. Like I need that framework to exist for the piece to exist. I don't know about like, I don't know if I have a comment about the history of that necessarily, but it is like super important to the individual pieces.
I mean, it ties in well to something that you've written and said before, where you think about whether or not a thought has an edge, right?
Yeah.
And similarly, if you're exploring a concept and you don't have some kind of predetermined container, whether it's a frame or a room or an entire museum or whatever, to put it in, it could just go on forever, and the possibility could just cause you to have a complete meltdown, having to fill infinite space with an idea.
Or even just like like we're all trapped in our bodies. Like that's the like ultimate container of like, right? Like we can't escape it. Like in our minds we can, but outside of that, it's kind of like, I don't know. I kind of see the frames as like a metaphor for that.
Yeah.
And that body of work for me started outside the frame, and it felt like I was compromising something. Like I love to build, I love to construct, I love to think about like the panel and the surface when I make a new painting or construction on a panel. And so it felt like I had to give something up while I was working with this new material for a while. And even though it was more sculptural, I don't know, that language didn't necessarily resonate with me, and I sort of enjoyed being able to fit it back into something that I was more familiar with. And yeah, that resonated more with me.
I'm going to jump in here. We've got just a couple minutes left, so if anybody wants to ask a question in person through video, you can unmute yourself and ask a question, give a comment. It's also just a really nice opportunity to give a little bit of love to Alex and Nicole. We really appreciate them being here. So please jump in, feel free. Just don't step all over each other.
Hi, my son has a question. He was here listening, and he has a question about how you got inspired to start working with yoga mats, Alex, and if you yourself had done yoga and if maybe that had brought you to using it.
Yeah, I was doing a lot of yoga as sort of like a way to spend some extra time in the studio. So I started grad school without a studio of my own. My partner and I ran a gallery that was our shared studios, and I'd never really had a space to sit back and consider my work. And so when I got to grad school, I was trying to do yoga in my studio to really like live with the work without having to just be working on it and like think about the work in that space. And then I had an eye surgery that was really preventing me from things that I was really enjoying, like using tools, and actually doing yoga was something that was considered dangerous for a while too. So, I sort of made up this fake yoga where I was deteriorating the yoga mat. I was just sitting on the floor and sort of cutting out these shapes, and it was like a way to still be connected to a ritual that I had in my studio for myself, but think about it differently and as something generative instead of something I couldn't do at the time. So, thank you.
Thank you.
I just drew this picture of the sea.
Oh, nice.
Amazing.
That's a good shark.
You know what this is?
Bananas?
It's a sunfish.
A sunfish.
Fishes don't have
Oh.
a back. It's just a head.
Thank you. It was really awesome talk. Thank you.
Thanks. Thanks.
Anybody else? One more question or big hugs for Nicole and Alex?
It's so nice to see everyone without a face mask on.
I know, it's so weird. Nice.
Love it.
Well, I want to thank you both so much. We've got some clap reactions going on. We've got people who can, yes, give us some waves. We love the waves. So I hope everyone will stay tuned, and just, at some point we will have this show in Wilkinsburg. It's going to happen. So watch our social media, sign up for our email list, and you will eventually see this amazing work in person. Thank you, Alex and Nicole, so much. David, do you want to say anything else on our way out?
Yeah, just echoing everything Casey just said. Thank you so much. This has been fantastic. When we did a little video tech test run of this the other day, Alex and Nicole got going so other save it, stop talking, save some for the real thing. So this has been really great, and really grateful that you all could join us, and look forward to seeing you all in person at some point, TBD.
TBD. All right. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.